Hello everyone. Welcome back to Soul Stories, a place where ordinary people reveal extraordinary courage, wisdom, and heart. Today's story is about a young woman who grew up in the dusty fields of a small farming village, a girl who learned life lessons from soil, sweat, and silence. When she walked into a towering corporate building for a job interview, the arrogant CEO thought he would humiliate her. But what she revealed in that room stunned everyone and changed more than just her future. It was a cold Monday morning when 23-year-old Amina Khan stepped off the crowded city bus. The tall glass building in front of her looked nothing like the world she came from. She had grown up in a quiet village where mornings began with roosters crowing and tractors rumbling across fields. Amina adjusted the strap of her worn leather bag and looked up at the skyscraper. Inside that building was the headquarters of Harper Global Industries, one of the most powerful agricultural corporations in the country. For months she had been preparing for this moment. The security guard glanced at her simple clothes and dusty shoes. "Interview?" he asked. Amina nodded politely. "17th floor," he said, pointing toward the elevators. As the elevator doors closed, Amina stared at her reflection in the metal walls. She wore a simple white shirt, a dark skirt, and the same pair of shoes she had worn during her university presentations. She thought about her father back home. Her father, Rahim Khan, had spent his entire life farming. His hands were rough from years of harvesting wheat under the scorching sun. When Amina told him she had received an interview at a major agricultural company, he smiled with pride. "Remember," he told her the night before she left, "knowledge doesn't belong only to people in suits. The land teaches wisdom too." Those words echoed in her mind as the elevator reached the 17th floor. Inside the conference room, 5 interviewers sat behind a long polished table. Laptops glowed, papers rustled, and quiet whispers filled the air. At the center sat the CEO himself, Victor Hale. Victor Hale was known across the business world for his sharp mind and ruthless leadership. He had built Harper Global into a billion-dollar empire. But he also had a reputation for arrogance. When Amina entered the room, Victor looked up briefly from his tablet. His eyes scanned her from head to toe. "You're the candidate from?" he asked. "Northern Valley Village, sir," Amina replied calmly. One of the interviewers raised an eyebrow. "A farming village," another murmured. Victor leaned back in his chair. "Interesting," he said with a faint smirk. "Let's see what rural education can bring to a global company." The interview began with simple questions. Amina answered them carefully. She spoke about sustainable farming systems, soil health, irrigation efficiency, and market supply chains. Her answers were precise, thoughtful, and grounded in real experience. One interviewer nodded with growing interest. But Victor seemed unimpressed. Finally he folded his hands. "Miss Khan," he said, "your resume says you graduated top of your class in agricultural economics." "Yes, sir. And yet you grew up working on a farm." "Yes, sir." Victor chuckled softly. "Tell me something," he said. "Why should a global corporation hire a farmer's daughter when we have applicants from top international universities?" The room fell silent. It wasn't just a question. It was a challenge. Amina paused for a moment, then spoke calmly. "Because farming is not theory to me," she said. "It's reality." Victor leaned forward. "Explain." Amina opened her bag and took out a small notebook. Its pages were filled with handwritten notes, diagrams, and numbers. 3 years ago, she said, my village experienced the worst drought in 20 years. One interviewer nodded. "We had the same report," he said quietly. Amina continued. "Most farmers lost nearly half their crops. Fertilizer costs were rising, water levels were falling, and many families were planning to sell their land." Victor tapped his fingers on the table. "That's unfortunate," he said flatly. "But what does that have to do with corporate strategy?" Amina smiled slightly. "Everything." She flipped open the notebook. "I designed a crop rotation and water-saving irrigation plan using simple tools available to our farmers." She slid the notebook across the table. The interviewers leaned closer. Charts showed water usage comparisons, crop yield projections, and cost savings. One interviewer whispered, This is impressive." Amina continued. "Within one season, the participating farms increased crop yield by 32% while reducing water usage by 40%. The room went quiet. Victor stared at the numbers. "These figures are real?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Amina replied. Verified by the local agricultural board. One of the interviewers checked her laptop quickly. Her eyes widened. He's right, she said to Victor. There was a regional report about this. Victor's expression hardened. He didn't like being surprised. Even if that's true, he said, small village experiments don't scale to global operations. Amina nodded respectfully. May I show you something else? She pulled out a folded map. It showed soil patterns across several agricultural regions. Harper Global's largest farms are experiencing soil degradation, she said. Victor's eyes narrowed. That information is internal. Amina met his gaze. Not if you study public satellite data. She pointed to the map. Your company has been planting the same crop cycle for years in these areas. The interviewers exchanged glances. Amina continued calmly. If you continue this pattern, your soil productivity will drop 18% within 5 years. Victor scoffed. That's speculation. Amina slid another page across the table. It contained detailed calculations. These projections are based on current nitrogen depletion rates. The room fell silent again. One of the senior analysts began typing rapidly. After a few seconds, he stopped. His eyes widened. Sir. Victor looked at him impatiently. What? Her numbers. They match our internal projections. For the first time since the interview began, Victor looked uncertain. Amina folded her hands quietly. But there's good news, she said. She flipped to the next page. If you adopt a rotational soil recovery system, you can increase long-term yield while reducing fertilizer costs by nearly 22%. One interviewer whispered, that's millions in savings. Victor stared at her. The arrogant confidence in his expression slowly faded. Where did you learn all this? He asked. Amina smiled gently. From the land. She paused before continuing. And from my father. The room listened carefully now. My father always said that soil tells a story. If you ignore it, the land will eventually answer in silence. No one spoke for a moment. Victor leaned back in his chair. So you're saying a farmer's daughter understands our business better than our executives? Amina shook her head. No, sir. She spoke calmly. I'm saying the farmers who work your land already understand these problems. They just haven't been invited into rooms like this. The words landed heavily in the room. One interviewer slowly closed his laptop. Another looked thoughtful. Victor stared at the notebook again. The same simple notebook he had almost ignored. Finally he asked quietly, if we hired you, what would you do first? Amina didn't hesitate. I would listen. She looked around the room. To farmers, field workers, soil experts, and local communities. Because agriculture doesn't succeed from boardrooms alone. Victor exhaled slowly. Then something unexpected happened. He stood up. The other interviewers looked surprised. Victor walked around the table and stopped in front of Amina. For a moment he said nothing. Then he extended his hand. Miss Khan, he said, I believe we've been interviewing the wrong people for years. Amina stood and shook his hand. Welcome to Harper Global. The interviewers began smiling. But the biggest surprise came next. Victor turned to the panel. Effective immediately, he said, we're creating a new sustainability strategy team. He looked at Amina. And she's leading it. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Amina blinked in disbelief. Sir, I only applied for an analyst position. Victor smiled slightly. And yet you just solved a problem my entire executive team couldn't. Later that evening, Amina stepped outside the building. The sun was setting behind the city skyline. Her phone buzzed. It was her father calling. How did it go? He asked. Amina laughed softly. Abba, you won't believe it. Back in the interview room, the executives were still discussing her proposal. Victor stood near the window, staring at the farmland stretching beyond the city. For the first time in years, he realized something simple. The smartest ideas don't always come from powerful offices. Sometimes they come from quiet fields where people work with patience, humility, and wisdom. And sometimes, a farmer's daughter walks into a room full of powerful executives and reminds them what real knowledge looks like. And that moment changes everything. Thank you for watching Soul Stories. If this story inspired you, remember that intelligence is not defined by where you come from, but by how you think, how you observe, and how you use your knowledge to help others. Subscribe to Soul Stories for more powerful stories about courage, wisdom, and unexpected heroes. Until next time, Keep believing in the power of humble beginnings and extraordinary minds.